Now, during a mystery shop, there are lots of pieces of information you have to get. One of the things you'll have to do is get names in most cases. You might need to get the name of a server or a salesperson or a manager or other people that you encounter during the course of the shop. What are some ways you might get a name of somebody who's helping you?
Ask them for it.
Ask them for it. What else could you do? Look at a name tag. Where else might you get a name? On a check or receipt. There are lots of ways to get names. Those are all good ones. Keep in mind, though, that even if the name is coming from a name tag or a receipt, it might not be that person's name. Sometimes people have to wear a name tag, so they just wear any name tag. They'll pick somebody else's off the shelf in the back because they forgot to bring theirs. So something that's always useful is to get a description of the person as well as the name. But that name from a name tag, from a receipt is good. You can also do things like asking them for a name. And how you do that depends on the circumstance, and it also depends on your comfort level. Sometimes it's appropriate to just say, if I need anything else, I'd like to ask for you, what is your name? Or you've done great tonight, you've really provided great service, I'd like to request you next time I come in, what is your name? Or you can ask somebody else. For example, you can ask the cashier, that server we had tonight was excellent, what is his name? Or this is my favorite, you can ask somebody a name because you think you know the person. Now sometimes you can talk to the person themselves and say, gosh, I feel like I know you from somewhere. You can strike up a conversation and get their name out of that. Or you can go up to somebody else and say, that manager over there looks so familiar and I'm embarrassed because I can't remember his name. Who is he? You know, have you ever had that experience in reality where you see somebody and you think, I know that person from somewhere but I don't know who they are? Where if you had their name, you could place them. So asking somebody else, I know that manager, I've met him somewhere and I'm embarrassed that I can't remember his name. That's a way to ask a name. And it's not going to stand out as something suspicious. It's something people ask. You can also listen for other employees to call them by name. If somebody says Paula and this person turns around, chances are her name is Paula. Right? Good chance of that? Or listen when they answer the phone, because often they'll use their names when they answer the phone. One shopper said if he's in a place with just a couple of employees, he might go out of the store where he can't be seen, call them back, and see if the person who helped him answers the phone and uses their name when they answer the phone. Someone else suggested that her favorite tactic was to call back if she wasn't able to get the name while she was there and say, you know, I think I left my sunglasses there, and I wanted to ask the lady who helped me, but I didn't get her name. She was tall and blonde. Stephanie, yes, I'm sure it was Stephanie. Could you ask if she found my glasses? Well, of course, Stephanie didn't find the sunglasses because they weren't left, but it was a way to get the name. Bottom line, you don't want to do anything that seems out of character. So if it's uncomfortable for you to do certain things, don't do them. Some people find it perfectly natural to walk in and just say, hi, I'm Kathy, and what's your name? Or just wait for the person to introduce themselves. I'm not comfortable doing that. I don't do that. One shopper said that when she's allowed to take her son along, he's great because he'll walk up to everybody. Now, he doesn't know anything about mystery shopping, and she doesn't talk to him about mystery shopping because you really can't trust a little child with information about the fact you're doing a mystery shop. They tend to be a little more open and forthcoming than we'd like. But her son just naturally would walk up to everybody and say, hi, I'm Jeffy. I'm this many. Who are you? Well, who's not going to tell Jeffy their name? They may not say how many they are, because your hands could cramp doing that, right? But they'll certainly say, well, hi, Jeffy, I'm Mary, or whatever the person's name is. So now you've got a name. Now remember, it's not always appropriate to take your children along on shops, but when it is, if your child is naturally outgoing, exploit that capability in your child and let them get the name for you. You always want to do something, though, that fits the situation. And I've had situations where it was just natural for me to ask the name. I've had other situations where it wasn't and I had to go to another plan. Think about what fits and what's comfortable for you, as well as what's natural for a customer in that situation to do. For example, some people will say, I would really like to write a letter because you've presented such great service today. I'd like to write a letter commending you. If they know they've done a crummy job, they're not likely to want to give you their name because they figure you're actually writing a complaint letter. But if they have done a good job and you want to use that, that might be appropriate. And in a way, you are sort of going to write a letter about the service you received today. It's just that it's not really a letter, it's a mystery shop report. So think about the situation you're in, what's natural for you, and come up with ways to get those names. In a mystery shop, you may also be asked to get other documentation. For example, it's common that you have to submit a receipt. You might have to make just a small purchase in order to have that receipt. Now, sometimes you make a small purchase and they don't offer a receipt. So in that case, unless the guidelines say otherwise, the best thing to do is simply ask, may I have my receipt, or may I have a receipt? Now, some people are uncomfortable doing that because they think, I just bought a pack of gum for $1. Why am I going to ask for a receipt? So they construct these elaborate reasons why they need the receipt. I have to have the receipt because my husband's tracking all the money we spend, and he's putting it into Quicken, and then he's developing these charts, and he's watching where we spend our money, and he's developing categories. Nobody cares. Too much information. And you know, when somebody starts giving you a story like that, doesn't that just make something stand up, like your little red flags going, wait a minute, something's wrong here. On the other hand, if you just say, may I have a receipt, that's a perfectly natural thing. And if you have to give an explanation, you just feel compelled, then say, may I have a receipt? I need it for my taxes, or I need it to get reimbursed. Because even if it's a very small purchase, a lot of companies, if you're being reimbursed by your boss or by someone else, they would need to see that receipt just to know how much it was. So if you just say, I need it for my taxes, or I need it to get reimbursed, that's a great explanation, but you don't even need to go that far. There are some times when you won't ask for a receipt, so make sure you know if you're supposed to or not. The guidelines will tell you if you are not supposed to ask, so be familiar with the guidelines. There are other things you might have to get on a shop also. For example, a business card. Now, why do you think they'd want you to get a business card? What do you think? Proof you were there. It shows you were there, it shows where you were, and it shows who you talked to there. So the business card is just proof that you actually were at the shop location. So what if they don't offer a business card? Often that's one of the questions on the form is, were you offered a business card? You want to wait until almost the end of the shop to give them the opportunity to offer that business card. But then let's say you're almost at the end, they haven't offered that business card, you're getting ready to go. All you have to do is say, may I have your card? Or if I have questions later, I'd like to give you a call, may I have your card? Something like that is fine. But what if they say, I don't have one? Now remember, the purpose of getting the business card was proof you were there. So look for another way to get that proof. If they have something else there they can put their name and phone number on, that's great. It could be somebody else's card. Maybe they're a new employee and they don't have cards, but there are other cards there and they could just write their name and phone number on somebody else's card. Or maybe there's a brochure or a floor plan or some kind of form or advertising material that they put out. Have them write their name and phone number on that piece of paper, and then you've got your proof. And just note in your comments that you were unable to get a business card, but you got this other piece of paper from that person. That satisfies the requirement in virtually 100% of cases. You might also be asked to look for other items on a mystery shop. For example, they might want you to look to see if there are comment cards out, or brochures about a particular promotion, or signage about that promotion. Or they might want you to get a cost estimate, or some other piece of paper, whether it's a catalog or anything from that business. Read the guidelines to know what you're supposed to do. If they don't have it out someplace, are you supposed to ask about it? For example, if there's no signage about that promotion, are you supposed to ask about the promotion? If they don't have any comment cards out, are you supposed to ask for a comment card? Read the guidelines to know what you're supposed to do if they aren't available. Do you need to pick one up, or just note that it was there? In some cases, they just want to know that there were brochures available about the promotion. They don't care that you pick one up. You can leave it. So read the guidelines to know what you're expected to do on these additional items. We talked earlier about getting timings and the fact that they're so important to the clients. Timings are critical because those are a big part of their service standards. For example, in a fast food environment, they're measuring things in seconds. And the difference between something being accomplished in 35 seconds and 37 seconds means they get the points versus they don't get the points. That's important to that location that's being evaluated. So it's important that your timings are absolutely accurate. Now, there are several ways to get timings. We mentioned using a stopwatch or a digital watch or perhaps a sports watch that has a stopwatch on it. All of those things work. Now, sometimes you don't have to get it to the second. Sometimes to the minute is okay. And there are a number of ways you can get timings in either case. In addition to watches and stopwatches, you can get timings from a PDA, an iPod. You can get it from your cell phone. Sometimes even clocks there in the location. For example, a clock on the wall might give you the times that you need. There are lots of ways to get times. What you want to be sure of is that you're getting them from one consistent source. If you get one time from your watch, one from your cell phone, one from the clock on the wall, and then one from the receipt, none of those are going to match, right? Because they're all going to be set to a different time. So you're going to be off on your timings. Make sure you're using one good consistent source for all of your timings. Know exactly what they want timed. If they say, how long did it take you to check out, they'd better have a better explanation of it than that, because I'm not sure if that means how long from the time I got in line to the time I left, or if they just want to know from the time I reached the cashier to the time I left. So know what you are to time. Do they want minutes or do they want minutes and seconds? That's another important distinction. And how do they want the timing expressed? Time of day or elapsed time? For example, it might say, what time did you order your entree? And you say 6:37 p.m. And then the next question is, how many minutes later was it served? And you say 8 minutes. You don't say 6:45 p.m. So the first one is time of day, the second one is elapsed time. Now when you're getting your timings, you don't necessarily have to think about that. I don't want to think about which timings are time of day and which ones are elapsed time, because it's hard enough just getting all the timings. So what I'll do is I'll note what time I'm starting with all these timings, and then I'll note, for example, time of day for each one or elapsed time for each one, depending on what I'm doing. And then I'll convert them as need be. If you're getting them all the same way, like if you're getting each thing, when something was ordered, when something was served, when something was ordered, when something was served, when dishes were cleared, then you're going to have all those times of day, and you can, by that, determine how many minutes elapsed, if that's the way they want that particular one expressed. Now, a lot of times you are doing timings that are split second, and they come one right after the other. Fast food shops are notorious for this, because the entire transaction may only take a minute or two. It's fast food, right? So as a result, you have to be getting all of these timings quickly. What a lot of people do is they use a stopwatch with a lap timer or split timer on it. That allows them to capture multiple timings without having to reset and keep looking at their watch or other things that would maybe give them away as a shopper. So let's say you have a stopwatch that's on your key fob, and you start the stopwatch as you get in line, and you note exactly what time it was. And then each time something happens that you need to capture the time of, you press the button that captures that elapsed time. So for example, maybe when you reach the counter, maybe when you're given your change and you get your food, each time you're going to press a button that captures that time. Then when you're done with the whole shop, you can go back and review those times, and you'll know when each thing happened. Now what a lot of people like to do with timings is use that digital voice recorder, and I touched on this earlier. With the digital voice recorder, it will show an elapsed time. So for example, if you know that you started this recording at exactly 5:12 p.m., then you can look at the digital recorder and it will show elapsed time for each thing that happened. So you'll know, for example, when you reach the counter, when certain things happen. You'll know if you go into a store how long it took you to check out. If you do something that cues yourself as to when you started getting in line, and then you know when you reached the register and when you left, you'll have timings for each of those things. So the digital voice recorder allows you to capture that, and you don't have to go back and listen to the whole recording to get those times and sit there timing it at home, because the voice recorder will normally show an elapsed time on it. So for example, when I've used that to get timings in a restaurant, like a sit-down restaurant where you're there for a significant amount of time, I can fast forward through all the conversation my husband and I are having, because I really don't need to listen to that again. But then I get to, okay, this is where the food was served, and I can see the elapsed time on there and know exactly when that happened. So that digital voice recorder can come in handy for that. And as I mentioned earlier, even if you're not capturing the voices, you can use a recorder to capture timings, because you can do something like coughing every time you want to capture a time, or you can have it in a pocket where you tap on the microphone whenever you're getting a time. Again, you don't do anything that draws attention to yourself, but if you're looking like you just have sort of a nervous mannerism and you tap yourself every once in a while, nobody's really going to notice that anyway, but if they do, they won't think anything of it. So get those timings as accurate as possible, record them in the way they want to have them recorded, minutes and seconds or minutes only, and then make sure also that you're recording them properly as elapsed time or time of day. When we talked about tip sheets earlier, we said that one thing you can do with some of your tip sheets is also make some of your notes on there. So if it reminds you that you're supposed to go to this department or you're supposed to ask this question or get this timing or this count, you can also jot your notes on that tip sheet in many cases. So if your tip sheet is a store flyer or classified ads or a shopping list or in your check register or on your PDA or some other device, you can just go in and sometimes add your notes to that tip sheet as you're doing the shop. However, there are some other ways you can get notes. One thing that a lot of shoppers really treasure as a resource is the closed bathroom stall because you can go in there and have some privacy. So in the middle of the shop, you can say, okay, I've got all this information in my head, I need to get it on paper. You've got to check the restroom anyway, right? So you go in, you close the stall, and you make some of your notes. Chances are you're not being observed in there. You can't be so certain of that in other areas, though. Even if you are in what appears to be an empty aisle, what's overhead? Cameras. And unless you want to hear an announcement along the lines of mystery shopper on aisle 7, you do not want to be standing there obviously making notes, even if there's nobody around, because the cameras can see you. And I wouldn't be surprised if some places don't have codes where they can make that announcement if they've spotted a shopper. So even if you think you're alone, don't assume that. Be discreet in all cases. You also want to be discreet about getting some of the information, like you don't want to walk in and stare at people's name tags, because that's a little uncool. And guys, if you're staring at women's chests, that can get you in a lot of trouble. So you want to be cautious. You want to be cautious and discreet about how you're getting this information, but then you want to be able to record it subtly again and discreetly. If you can't go into a private place like a closed restroom stall, look for ways to make notes without anybody knowing that's what you're doing. We talked about making notes because you're talking to somebody else planning a trip or a purchase or something, and you're making notes on your brochures or on the ads. That's one way to make some notes without necessarily making it appear that you're making notes about the shop. You can also make notes by appearing to be writing something else. For example, you could be on this phone or pretending you're on the phone with someone and you're getting directions, or you're retrieving your messages and you're writing things down. And as you're writing this down, it sounds like you're writing down directions to somebody's house, or you're just copying your messages down and writing phone numbers. But what you're really writing is the description of the salesperson and what they said to you and the condition of the racks and whatever else you have to get. In a lot of situations, that can be appropriate because you might be on the cell phone while you're in a store, in a restaurant, someplace else. So that can be a way to get your notes down. Some people like to record themselves. Now, you have to be careful about this because you don't want to be overheard. But if you have a voice recorder, you might be able to speak into the recorder and get your notes. Or what a lot of people like to do is leave a message on their voicemail on their cell phone or at home. So they'll make a call and leave their notes as a message, and they can retrieve it later to go back and review that shop. One shopper said she speaks a sort of uncommon language, so she'll leave the message in that language, figuring that the other people around, even if they happen to overhear her, won't know what she's saying. That worked great until one of her kids came home one day and thought, what's Mom talking this gibberish on the phone for? Figured she just made a mistake and accidentally turned her cell phone on or something and deleted the message. So if you're doing that, make sure people know not to delete your messages from your home phone if that's where you're leaving them. You don't want to be overheard, though, so make sure you're not in a place where you can be heard by employees or even other customers, because you don't know who those other customers are either. So be discreet about all of that. All of these things are tools to help you when you sit down to do your report, because that report has to have as much detail as you can possibly get into it. So the more information you have about what you observed, what people said, all the details of your experience, the richer your report will be. Now, along that line, you also might want to improve your memory. And you might think, well, I just can't remember things. Train yourself. With practice, you'll get better. And you can use little tips and tricks that work for a lot of other people. Some people like to make up rhymes. I met somebody who said he was a delivery man, and his truck driver would make up a rap of where they were going that day. So he would rap the addresses as they drove along. I'm not that talented, I can't do that. But I find that setting things to music helps me remember things. So if I need to remember something, I'll put it to a musical tune, either a tune I already know or just some sort of random tune I create, because the rhythm helps me remember the words. Same thing with rap, it's the same concept. So if you put it to music and let it run through your head, you'll be able to recall it a lot better. That works for a lot of people. Other people have other mnemonic devices where they have associations. You might associate them with someone, like if you're trying to remember a name, you might associate them with someone else you know who has that name. Or if you're trying to remember what they said, you might associate the words with some sort of visual image. Choose something that works for you, but also practice a lot. If you have a partner that you shop with a lot, like a spouse who goes with you or a friend, test each other, even when you're not shopping. Make it a game to test each other and see if they can remember what the person's name was, or what color of shirt they were wearing, or did they wear glasses. Sometimes those things, like was the person wearing glasses, did this guy have facial hair, what color was somebody's hair, those things are not always easy to remember. You'd think they're obvious, but you don't always notice them or remember them. So practice if that's an area that's a problem for you. The more practice you get, the better you get. Your memory does not wear out with use. It only gets better. So use the tricks that work for you, like mnemonics, melody, rhythm. Practice, and your memory will get better. You'll have more details, remember more things more easily for your reports. Because there are times when it's difficult to make notes, if not impossible. So the more you can remember, the better your reports will be. Now, once you've done the shop, you've read all the guidelines, you knew what you were supposed to do, you went out, you actually interacted with the salesperson and the other staff there, and now you're back at your computer and it's time to do the report. This is usually most mystery shoppers' least favorite part, is writing the report. So let me give you some ideas that might make it a little bit easier for you. First of all, most of the reports you'll see will be yes/no questions. They'll ask, were you greeted within 30 seconds? Yes or no? Was the restroom clean? Yes or no? Did the person use their name when they introduced themselves or when they came to the table? Yes or no? These are all pretty obvious, right? It's a yes or it's a no. Typically, though, they'll want to know more than just that yes or no. They'll want some comments or perhaps a narrative. Now, a comment usually refers to a specific item, like if they asked, were you greeted within 30 seconds, and you say no, they'll want a comment, because what do they want to know? How long was it before you were greeted? If it wasn't 30 seconds, how long did it take? So if you say, were you greeted in 30 seconds? No, your comment might just be that Julie greeted you 45 seconds after you arrived. It just says, here's what actually happened. Sometimes they want a narrative, and a narrative is a chronological description of what happened while you were there. The narrative just takes you step by step through, you walked in, you were greeted, they made this suggestion, you tried this item on, you made the decision to purchase something, you went to the cash register, this is what happened there, and then as you exited, they asked you to come back again. So you're just going through the whole process, and obviously that was a shortened version of what a narrative might be. You'd have a bit more detail in it in a typical situation, but it's a description in order of what happened while you were in that location doing that shop. Your shop reports may include both comments and narratives. Now, there are some shop reports, by the way, that are strictly narrative. And if you are assigned one of these, you'll know this before it's assigned to you. They'll let you know in the email that offers the assignment or on the job board. They'll tell you a narrative is required. And in that case, you are writing a lot of details about what happened during your visit. And it's not about yes/no questions. It's about describing everything that occurred. It is a little more complicated than the typical report, but a narrative report can provide a lot of information to the client. So let's say you're doing a standard report where you just have to have some comments and narratives in the report. Let's talk about some things you can do to make your reports better, because I think this is one of the areas where every shopper can be better. No matter how good you are and how experienced you are, you can always improve. I'm always looking for ways to improve my reports. One of the most important things is to stick to the facts. People have this misconception that mystery shopping is opinion research, that it's about us telling what we thought. How did they do? Well, I thought they could have been nicer, or I would have liked them to do this. Really not about what you want. It's about whether or not they're upholding that client's standards. So you're not giving your opinion, you're describing facts. Think of yourself as a journalist. When a journalist goes in, they are there to observe and report. They're not there to influence the outcome, and they're not there to color the story. They are there to observe and then report the facts of what occurred while they were there. That's what you do as a mystery shopper. So stick to the facts and stay away from opinion type language unless it's specifically requested. And there are some reports where they will ask for some opinions. But in general, unless they're requested, they don't really want your opinion. Stick to the facts. Now you also want to watch out in that regard for I language, because it's easy to fall into I think, I feel, I believe. Those are all opinions. Now that's not to say you should never say I in a report. You will say I in your reports. When I asked this question, Sheila took me to this display. You will say I. But if you find yourself starting every question, starting every statement with I, or if you find yourself saying I think, that's an opinion. So watch out for too many I's and watch out for opinion statements that start with I. Also avoid extreme language, especially negative language. If you say something was horrible, or you say somebody was very rude, or you say something was disgusting, if you say the service was horrible, what does that tell me about what happened? It sounds like you didn't have a good experience, but other than that, I have no idea why your experience was horrible. So instead of telling me it was horrible, describe it. When you say something like that, it's extreme, it's negative, it's vague, and it's more likely that your report will be questioned. Because if a client has a report come back that says the service was horrible, they're probably going to say, well, no, it wasn't. I mean, we're talking an opinion here. And you say, well, yes, it was, and they say, no, it wasn't. There's nothing specific there. On the other hand, if you describe exactly what happened, it's a lot harder for them to refute that. Horrible is vague and it's opinionated. They can dispute that all day. And they're liable to, especially with a negative report. So be specific in order to avoid that problem. And use precise language. Stay away from things like so, very, really, a lot, kind of, sort of, about. Was it about 6 minutes or was it 6 minutes? And saying something was very dirty does not tell me any more about it than saying it was dirty. It's still not specific. It doesn't add anything at all to your report. So vague language really needs to come out of your reports, and that's the things like I said, so, very, really, a lot, kind of, sort of, or worse yet, kinda, sorta. Bad. Don't include those in your reports. When you're describing what happened, tell what you found, not what they should do. In other words, instead of saying the floor needed to be mopped, why might you say a floor needed to be mopped? It was dirty in some way, right? What kind of problem might you have found that would cause you to say that the floor needed to be mopped specifically?
Dirty, trash.
Like trash or footprints or streaks of something on the floor. Instead of saying that it needed to be mopped, describe what you found. Otherwise, they don't have a picture of what it was that you saw. So if there were muddy footprints on the floor, describe the muddy footprints. Don't say that the floor needed to be mopped. Don't tell them what to do. Don't say that the trash needed to be emptied. If the trash can was full, overflowing, you describe exactly what it appeared, but don't talk about what they needed to do to fix it. Likewise, you don't want to say that the employees need to be trained to be more polite. You don't want to make those kinds of statements. You just want to say what happened, that nobody said thank you, or that they were in some way rude to you. Describe that rude behavior. Include both positive and not so positive things in your comments. It's tempting sometimes. We see, well, I have to have at least a certain number of characters, or I have to have at least 3 comments, and I have to have a comment for every no answer. So when I've finished doing all my comments for my no answers in this section, I've hit that minimum. I don't have to do any more. Give a report that accurately represents what happened. Chances are it wasn't completely negative, that yes, there were some things they didn't do right, but there were some good things too. So put in a couple comments about those good things. Again, you want a report that reflects exactly what happened. And if all you talk about are the negative things, it doesn't tell exactly what happened. So put those positive comments in there too. Also, if all you talk about are the negative things, it makes it more likely that the report will be questioned, because it just sounds like you had it in for them. So mention the positive things as well, because that will give a more balanced, accurate picture and also make it more palatable for the person who is evaluated to accept the things that you had to say were wrong, because they're seeing that you're noting the positive things as well. And if you get nothing else out of today, out of this workshop, I want you to remember these 4 words, because these 4 words will make your reports better. Describe behavior, not feelings. Now let me explain what I mean by that. I know that everybody who's ever written a mystery shop report has at some point written a sentence along the lines of,